Are you satisfied with your nudge settings on your virtual pinball cabinet? Well, maybe you're a lot like me and it's just not quite 100% there. So on today's episode, I'm going to show you what I'm going to do to try to dial in that nudge settings and the tilt settings so that this thing feels like a real pinball machine. Stick around, you're not going to want to miss it. All right, so since I've started this virtual pinball cabinet, I have been playing a lot more real pinball, and I'm getting a little better, and I'm getting a lot better at my nudging. Now, the problem is, the better I get at real pinball, the worse my nudge settings seem on my virtual pinball cabinet. And the main reason is because I have surround sound feedback on here. So every time I hit a flipper button or a pop bumper, the exciters shake the cabinet, and that gets registered as a false nudge, which I don't want. So what I've done in the past is I have increased the threshold for where it detects those to such a high level that now it requires pretty hard hits on the cabinet to get a nudge to register. So for example, a slap save, I'm gonna have to probably hit the cabinet about that hard. If I want it to go up, I gotta actually hit the cabinet about that hard to get it to work. Now, I've been playing like that for a while and it does work. It's just not great, and it doesn't really register really nicely for any kind of gentle upward nudges and things like that. So one of the first things I think we need to look at is isolating the vibrations from our SSF that are going directly to that KL25Z board and getting detected as false nudges. So I've got some products to show you that we're going to use for that. And then when I'm done, we'll be able to dial in the threshold settings a little better, and I'll show you how to do that too. So let's go. All right, so what I'm going to use to suppress the vibrations are these EVA rubber blocks. Now the EVA foam is really, really good at silencing vibrations, so even better than rubber, and then it's sandwiched between two rubber chunks so that you can kind of mount it solidly and it can take some force. Now this is a bit more skookum than I really need, but we're going to use that and put that onto the board. And then on top of this, to make sure that nothing's going to get through, I've also got one of these quadcopter anti-vibration dampener mounts. That's for these computers so that you don't get any of that vibrations put into the computer and make this quadcopter fly funny. So we're going to use both of these and hopefully this will work for us. Man, it's been a while since I've been inside this cabinet and I forgot how beautiful it is in here. Sweet. All right, let's take this thing out. Okay, just a little side note that I kind of thought I should check, and sure enough, I'm glad I did, is because we're thinking of mounting our delicate, sensitive, expensive, hard to get KL25Z board to this, I kind of thought carbon fiber, hey, that's kind of cool, lightweight. Does this actually conduct electricity? And I was thinking, nah, it probably doesn't. Here's my multimeter checked on for checking for continuity. So that will beep if it's conductive. Look at that, it is conductive, so be very careful that none of these electrical connections will make contact with this. So we're probably going to have to put something in between there to really make sure that that does not connect and short and fry one of these again. Just thought I'd mention that to save somebody's butt in the future. So I took one of these EVA blocks from the set that I got from Amazon, and I will put a link down below for you for that. And I have taken off a little bit off of that. I just used a bandsaw, but you could take a hacksaw. It cuts very easy, so that this quadcopter anti-vibration mounts can kind of fit a little better and nicer on there and take up the same real estate in the vpin. Now, and then this will go on top like that. Now, I kind of thought, how do we mount all these pieces? I don't really want to start screwing these down and screwing everything to it, because I think the screws will kind of take out a little bit of the anti-vibration functionality. So what I'm thinking is I'll put a little bit of silicone caulking gun out on here, put that to the wooden board, put the same silicone on here to stick it to this, and then maybe even silicone on here to the quadcopter mount. And that way, even the silicone in between those layers has a little bit of anti-vibration to help not transfer those vibrations. So let's give this a try. All right, this looks pretty promising. So silicone's gonna take a couple hours to harden and really overnight or 8 hours to cure. So I'm gonna leave this overnight, check how solid it is in the morning, and then we'll continue from there. Now I'm also thinking that if we can prevent the vibrations even getting into this board, that would be good as well. So I'm gonna cut some strips like about 1 inch wide and take these screws out and put these underneath so that when I bolt this down, there'll be a little bit of anti-vibration before it even gets into the board as well. It's the next day and this looks like it is glued in place nicely. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen the screws on the shelf and get these in between so that this entire shelf is a little bit of vibration dampening as well. And then we can plug this in and see how it worked. I got this all plugged in. I've just siliconed this down, and honestly, I don't want to start using this too much and have things slide. So once again, I'm going to let this sit overnight, and I will come back with you, and we can check and see how this worked out. All right, it's the next day, and that silicone is all cured up. So now I've turned the computer on, and I'm going to show you how to adjust or modify your nudge settings using some tricks that you may or may not have known about your KL25Z board. So let's do that. Okay, now this process might be a little different depending if you have a virtual pin controller like I do, or if you're using Pinscape or something else to be using this. However, a lot of these builds are going to be using the KL25Z board. So I'll show you what you do with virtual pin controller and 2 different ways that you can actually detect where your nudge thresholds are. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to open up our virtual pin controller, and then we're going to go to View up at the top left corner and go to Controller Settings. Now, the 2 different ways is whether you're using Pinscape or you're using this virtual pin controller or something else, you're going to have something that's going to be detecting your accelerometer. So for example, in virtual pin, if I give the cabinet a little shake on the x-axis here, you can see that that yellow bar is moving. Okay, that yellow bar is just the accelerometer, raw data coming in and out. So depending on your nudge threshold settings, you'll see that there's the tilt X and the tilt Y that's in green. Notice that when I give it gentle shakes on the cabinet, that only the yellow is moving, not the green. And what that means is it's not registered a bump considered to be a nudge. So if I hit it a little harder or nudge it a little harder, you can see that those green values are going. So that is one way that you can actually see when it is actually detecting a nudge, as well as how powerful it is. Now, like I said, you can see that in your Pinscape software or here in the virtual pin controller software. Now, the other thing that I want you to pay attention to here is this right here where it says nudge threshold and LED nudge threshold. So I can't comment on other boards, but if you're all using the KL25Z board, I think this is the same. If not, then it's only for virtual pin. There is a little red LED light on the KL25Z board that when it considers it's a nudge, based off of what you've put in your nudge threshold settings, you will have a little red light on your KL25Z. So for example, if I tap the cabinet, you'll see there's your red light detecting that that's a nudge. However, if I'm hitting flippers and kind of aggressively, you notice that it's not turning on. So we can use this red light to detect, and it shows us when it actually thinks it's a nudge or not, and based off of what values you have for your nudge threshold. So the way you're gonna kind of get down on this so that you can get it exactly how you like it is you're gonna start really, really low. And since we've done these modifications, I don't know how low I can go. So we're gonna see. I would recommend you start at 0, but realistically I think 0 is gonna be too sensitive, so let's try 1,000. So we're going to put 1,000 in here. And we'll also put our nudge threshold as 1,000 as well. Okay, now we're going to save this. So we're going to go up to Save Config. And then go ahead and close this. And you can reopen it just to make sure that it did save that. All right, so it did save it. So now if we go back and start tapping on the cabinet, oh yeah, I barely am touching the cabinet, and you can see that red light is going on. So that is too sensitive. Now, realistically, we should have a game popped up. So I'm going to open up a game, and I would recommend that you take a game that is really quite loud. You love the SSF sound and feel from it. Maybe one of your more aggressive tables. So for me, that might be Diner or Attack from Mars or the Getaway. Those have really nice flipper sounds, and the pop bumpers are really nice and loud and tend to be the loudest ones too. So let's open up one of those. And I'm going to mute all the sounds. Okay, so now that I've got a game going and you can hear my SSF for my flippers, we're going to go back and look at our KL25Z board. And notice that when I'm hitting those, I'm not actually getting the red LED on the KL25Z to light up. But if I give it a little bump and a little nudge, it is detecting that. Okay, so that's kind of a good sign. I was actually expecting that SSF was going to trigger that. So I can tell you already that these modifications we've done for the anti-vibration have done wonders, because this should have been triggering at almost 4,000 and we've got it down to 1. And the nudging is definitely more gentle. So if I'm hitting the flipper buttons normally, it's not actually getting it to trigger. If I do a little bit harder, kind of like someone just slapping the buttons a little bit, I'm getting the occasional kind of flicker. So if somebody kind of slaps buttons when they play, and not really meaning to nudge, but just slapping the buttons, you might get the occasional nudge. So, and then this would be like a slap save. So guaranteed red LED light. So that would do our slap nudges, but like I said, somebody kind of smacking these a bit too hard is going to be causing that to nudge maybe when they don't want it to. So what we're going to do is we're going to increase that nudge threshold and that LED nudge threshold value up until you can kind of slap a little bit on the buttons, not a slap save, but just a little bit more of a kind of aggressive hitting the buttons until we don't get that red LED to light up. So Control-Alt-Tab, go back to the vpin controller. And so all you're going to do is you're going to adjust this up or down based off of what you just found. So we're going to try to go a little bit higher with this. So, but we're pretty close. So why don't we try 1250? And whatever you make the LED nudge threshold, make the nudge threshold the same. Okay, and then once again, save that. Close it. And try our settings now. Okay, once again, little gentle presses. Absolutely no red LED. Okay, here's a little kind of slapping the buttons a bit. Okay, there's 1 there. That's pretty aggressive. I don't know if anybody's gonna be slapping them that hard, but they are still there. So I think we'll creep up a little bit more on that. So Control-Alt-Tab, go back to Virtual Pin Controller. Okay, we're gonna try 1500. We'll save that. Okay, light button presses, nothing. Okay, a little bit aggressive slapping of the buttons. Okay, I didn't get a single one there, so maybe we could even creep it down a little more, or we could see how that settings are, especially if the nudge feels good. Okay, I think that setting might be okay, and we can give it a try and tweak it later anyway. And then here's our slap saves. Awesome. Okay, now if we want to have other sound effects to try to get to see if things like our pop bumpers are going to give us a problem or give us grief here, what you can do is you can quit this and quit to editor, close that. Now we're going to open this again, but to not play it, we just want to edit it. Okay, and then we can go to Table, go to Sound Manager. Okay, and in your Sound Manager here, you can go through any of these sound effects and find something that you think that might be really loud and try to play it. And you can literally just kind of spam this play button and play it over and over to see if that causes an issue, like this. And all you got to do is look and see if that red light's going on your KL25Z or not. If it is, then it's registering as a nudge, and then you may have to tweak your settings. So just another way of kind of playing the sounds that you want to see if it's going to be okay or not. But I would recommend that you open a table that you find that is aggressive and causing issues and false nudges, and use that as your kind of test table to tweak everything down to. But if you don't like that and you want kind of like a baseline, there is a nudge and test calibration table that you can open up. And this is it here. I don't like using this because it seems just too floaty. It doesn't really seem realistic to me to be able to tweak my settings, but it definitely can give you an idea of what's going on. So there's my nudge, one way, the other way, my upward nudge. So you can see that it is working, but like I said, it's all over the place. It seems like even the individual balls are a little bit different. So I don't like using this one for testing, but I definitely can get you kind of going and seeing that something is happening. Highly recommend you use a real table. All right, now that we have our nudge threshold for when we're hitting our buttons a little bit on the side of the cabinet, we now have to adjust our shaker motor strength, because if that's shaking the cabinet too much and triggering those false nudges, then we're gonna have problems. So for me, because I have my shaker motor, my gear motor on my SainSmart's USB relay board, I can manually go in there and turn it on, and then I can turn it up or down to scale it how I like it. If you don't have any means to do that, then you're gonna have to start up a game, find something that's got some shaking in it. I believe High Speed Getaway has that at the beginning. So you can find a table that shakes a lot and kind of on command, so you can set this easy. So for me, I'm gonna go to my USB relay manager, and it's this exe file right here. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, or if you don't have this, I've got a great video on how to set up your SainSmart board, so go watch that, and we're just basically repeating a little bit of this one. So open this up, there's my board right there. We're gonna open it. Green means it's connected. Go to your manual mode, and then this relay one is for my gear motor. So we can check and see if it's shaking right now. And it is not affecting that board at all, at KL25Z. There's no threshold light going off, so the gear motor is fine. Now let's check on the shaker motor. All right, you can see that shaker motor is driving that thing nuts. So now we're gonna turn it down, and we'll just keep turning it down until the light goes off. And we know we're underneath our threshold. Maybe just a little touch less so that we for sure don't have it, in case it does a little bit more aggressive later. Okay, we're done with that. We're gonna close this up. Okay, now we're getting into setting our VPX settings. So go to where you set up. For me, it's C drive, vPinball, visual pinball, and I'm going to start with my default VPX, which is this one right here. So that's my 10.7. Okay, I don't want to start a game. And then I'm going to go to preferences, and then I'm going to go here, configure keys, nudge and DOF. Now the very first thing that I want to show you is whether you have the X-axis actually proper and maybe the Y-axis. So one of the things that I think is really important to explain to people that are new to pinball and new to virtual pinball is when you are nudging the cabinet, what are you actually shifting? Is it the ball, or is it the actual pinball table and cabinet itself? So here's how it's supposed to be. When a ball, for example, is coming straight down the center and it's going to drain in between the flippers, you can do something called a slap save. And what you are trying to do is when you hit the cabinet and the button at the same time on the right side here, you're not actually moving the ball. What you're doing is shifting the cabinet underneath the ball to the left. And what that does is the tip of the right flipper can now shift over that 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, whatever it needs. And then when you flip the button, it just barely catches the ball and clears it out, and you successfully save the ball. There we go, nudge to the right, save. So that is the direction that things should be moving when you're actually nudging the ball. Up and down is pretty self-explanatory. You're shifting up, you're bringing the table once again upwards, and if it connects with the ball, that's when you're going to hit it and shove the ball upwards. So in the beginning, if you've got your x-axis wrong and it's not doing what I just explained, there is this part right here that you can click to reverse the x-axis. Now, I'm going to let you in on another little tip that it took me way too long to figure this out, is that when I was trying to set mine up, it was reversed, and I tried checking this box, and I would close this, close VPX completely, which allows it to save. So whenever you make any changes in VPX, you need to close it completely, close the table, close VPX, and when you restart it, that's when it saves. So when I was clicking on this reverse checkbox, it would save it, but it wasn't actually reversing the x-axis, and it was getting very frustrating to try to figure out what was going on. So if you have a virtual pin, and this might work for other kind of controllers as well, so if I open up virtual pin controller, and you go up to view, controller settings, I don't know why it took me so long to spot this, but there is literally an invert X here, and this is where it has to be changed, at least in my setup for virtual pin. I had to have this checked off to invert the X to get it going the right way for me. I couldn't do it in VPX. So another helpful tip that hopefully will help somebody out there. When you do click this or make any changes, make sure that you save config before you close. All right, so now that you got your nudge going the proper ways, the next two settings that you're going to play with quite a bit, and this is going to take a while, it's not going to be the same for every cabinet, is your X and Y max and your X and Y gains. Now, I have already messed around for several hours with this. These are my numbers. They're probably not going to work for you. However, you can use this as a guide. Perhaps they are close for you. X max and Y max is the maximum amount of force that VPX will allow the ball to be nudged. So if you are finding that you give it a hard nudge and the ball shoots across like a rocket and it seems unrealistic, you're going to want to lower your X or Y max. If when you're hitting it and you're hitting it crazy hard and it's not really doing much and not ever kind of acting too crazy, then you might actually have to increase this. So take a look at my numbers, that they're pretty low. And I did that so that this is going to feel realistic. Even on a real cabinet, you give it a crazy hard upward shove, you're not going to be moving it all that much. So I played with those numbers until I got away from the craziness that did not seem realistic, yet being able to do what I thought was realistic. Okay, now your X and your Y gain is essentially your sensitivity. So when you do nudge it, how much does VPX kind of magnify that force? And put it into the cabinet. So if you're finding that you're just barely tapping the cabinet and the balls are flying across the playfield, then you got to turn down your gain. If it's the other way and you're slamming on this cabinet and it's not seeming to kind of move very much, then you may have to increase your gain. So for me, I've got 125, and I found that my Y gain was a little bit better if I increased it a little bit more. Just because I wanted it to be easier for me to push forward and get a light nudge going forward so that when the ball was on top of slingshots, I could get them out without having to slam the cabinet. Now for your dead zone, realistically, if you've got your nudge threshold set properly, you don't have to touch dead zone, so you can leave that at 0%. If you're finding that there's some games that, like just maybe the occasional game that is a little bit too much vibration, sets this thing off and does weird things while you're in gameplay, you can play with adding a couple percent, but I would not go anything more than 4 or 5%. And realistically, I have this set up how I like it with 0. These are the settings that I had from the beginning. They've stayed the same. And then for tilt sensitivity, this is one that you're going to just have to play a bunch of games and get some time in here and see how the games are actually interacting with your settings. If you're finding that you are slap saving like crazy and nudging really, really hard and you're not getting any tilt triggers, any warnings, no tilts, then it's possible that this number is going to have to be increased. So go higher to make it more sensitive and more prone to being tilted. If it's the opposite and all the games you're playing are just triggering tilts and warnings like crazy and you can barely play the game, then you're going to have to lower this number. I found 850 was about the right sweet spot for me. So you can use that as a starting point, but you're going to have to adjust that for your tables. So once again, guys, these are my settings for my cabinet and how I have things set up here. Everyone's going to be slightly different. So as a suggestion, maybe use these as a starting point and then go from there. So you're going to have to adjust these. And I put in 5, 6, 7 hours this week trying to get this dialed in how I like it. One other thing I should mention while we're here, if you open up your visual pinball, we'll just close this. If you go up to preferences, and this time go to video graphic options, there's one more thing that I should mention since we're talking about nudges. So in the beginning, your stock setup's going to have a number here where it says visual nudge strength. This is going to, when you nudge the cabinet hard enough, it's going to actually shake, visibly shake the table so that you can see that you've nudged it and getting towards a tilt. So whether you want that gone or want to add it, this is where you're going to do that. So if there's any number in here besides 0, that is the strength of how hard it's going to shake visually on the screen. So if you want yet another way to be able to see when your system's being nudged, you can put a number in here. Or if you want it off because you got your nudge settings set, you're going to just set this to 0. And that way there is going to be no nudge shown. So remember, when you make changes, you have to press OK, close it out completely, and then reopen it. And just to show you, if we check, so as you can see, it's still 0 there, so that means there's going to be no visual added nudge, just showing the ball where it's simulating that the table is moving underneath it. Okay, and one other thing, we just changed the nudge settings for this VPX 10.7, which is my default. There is my alternate launchers down here for 64-bit at 10.7 and our 10.8 64-bit. So you're going to have to go through these and check that the settings are exactly the same. So for example, open another one, go up to preferences, nudge, and make sure these are the same. Maybe snap a picture with your camera, your cell phone, and then you can come back and make sure that these are adjusted so they are the same. Otherwise, if you don't change the other VPX, you may open up some newer tables and find that, wow, the settings are really off, and you might kind of get confused a bit with what's going on. All right, enough yakking. Let me show you some nudging on the cabinet now. All right, so we got the ball here in the plunger lane, and I'm going to just show you how light I can get this thing to barely move. So I've got this really quite sensitive, and that's just really light nudges upward. If I give it a little harder, it should get a little bit more of a hop. Like that. And then we've even got like our huge hits. All right, now with the ball on the flipper here, I could do the same thing. So just ever so slight nudges, or we can go a little harder. But all I want is that little bit of nudge going on when I just have to shove a little bit forward here. So not hammering the cabinet anymore. All right, let's take a look at another game. All right, this is Medieval Madness, and this is a great table to practice your slap saves, or to test them in this case. The reason being is you're always trying to hit the castle, and when you hit the castle, there's often the balls will drain right down the center between the flippers. And if you're talented and experienced enough, you could do something called a slap save. So hopefully I can show you that. And then the other thing we can show you too is when I launch the ball with the plunger, it's going to pop around in the pop bumpers for a second, and then it always kicks out on this game to the right orbit, and it rides down that wall. And often what happens is it can catch and trigger the slingshot at the bottom, and because it's going down so fast, it can cause the ball to go right in between the flippers. So a good technique is, as that ball is coming down the wall, you just give it a little tap, and that will make the wall shove the ball over just a little bit, just enough to clear that slingshot and then prevent that from happening. So hopefully I can show you this all in one go. If not, you guys are going to see just some cuts of how this happened. Okay, there we go. Yeah, there's a gentle tap, clear the slingshot. Let's get rid of this drawbridge. Or not. Let's try now. There we go. Okay, we can do the same tap on the left wall. That was a bit aggressive, but it did clear it. Here we go. No slap save needed. Okay, here we go, right? There we go. That saved that one. Listen to that beautiful SSF. Another little gentle save on the right wall there. Okay, slap saved, that's saved. That was gonna go down. Yeah, hopefully you guys can see that. I might slow it down and post edit.
Slap saved, that's saved. That was gonna go down.
That was gonna drain. So there's your slap save. Now, one of the last things I'll suggest for you is that when you get this thing nailed down exactly how you want, but maybe there's just a couple tables that the SSF hits really, really hard, remember I've got a great video on Pinball. I'll post the link above for you to find that. That way you can go in and tweak those exciters front and back exactly how you like it. So you might have to lower some of those tables down so that you don't have any of those false nudges happening. The ability to tweak those settings is just absolutely amazing. All right, that's a wrap in another video from Way of the Wrench, this time on how to isolate your vibrations and dial in those nudge settings so that this thing feels like a real pinball machine. If you have any questions or concerns, put them down below and I'll help you out as much as I can. And if you haven't already, why don't you join us on Instagram so that way you can see what's going on in the shop in between videos. Speaking of videos, next virtual pin videos, man, we got lots of little things to be doing for you guys, including, I got a little secret, I may or may not be making a completely new cabinet, which would be a whole new series using new parts and new techniques for you guys. So if you want to be part of that, maybe drop me a message down below. Till next time, take it easy.